Well, I have this little sticky note on my computer, Tim.
You do?
And it says, happy birthday, Tim. So I find it to be, this just sounds like it's time for me to sing to you. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday, dear Timmy.
Oh, Zach.
Happy birthday to you. Woo!
Appreciate it, man.
Okay.
What better way to celebrate than doing a show with you?
Well, I appreciate that. Did Terry tell you what happened the other day?
No.
I saw you guys post. She posted something about your birthday on Tuesday on the book face. And I texted her and I said, it is not his birthday. I know his birthday is August 1st. What happened? Because I thought maybe I'm just an idiot. Of course, I'm still an idiot. But in this case, I was like, oh my God, I forgot his birthday. I talked to him today. I didn't even say happy birthday. I was right. She said you guys celebrated a couple days early because some people were leaving. Perfectly fine. Perfectly great. But yes, I haven't sang someone happy birthday in about 25 years. So congratulations.
Well, I appreciate that. That's great. Yeah. And so we had to adjust schedules, which really kind of lends itself into the show in terms of what we're going to be talking about today. Pretty high interest show, all about people staying, leaving within the Hampton Roads area. But so our daughter is a rising senior at James Madison University. So she's doing a trip before school starts. And then, so we had to shift schedules around to accommodate children in their travels.
I feel like when I used to work in TV, I had to work all the holidays. So it was always like that anyway. Like Christmas is like in January. Thanksgiving is in February, stuff like that. Obviously, those are Zack stats, but it happens. So I'm glad you guys were able to accommodate. Yeah. So we're thrilled, delighted, excited. Insert more words here.
I know it's ready to dive in with Kris and Peter from Fahrenheit Advisors. This is, like I said, captured a little bit of attention. What was it that captured attention? Peter, I'll let you jump in and talk about, what is it that we're going to talk about today? A little bit of a study that was conducted. Tee us up.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, it's good to be with you guys. So we're going to talk about the study that we did on behalf of the Hampton Roads Executive Roundtable and the Workforce Council, Hampton Roads Workforce Council. Two great organizations who've been concerned about this topic for a long time, asked us to take a look at some of the reasons why people, particularly young professionals, are leaving the region. So that's what we're going to talk about today.
I would like the audience to know that I know none of the report at this point. I know nothing. So I'm excited and a little terrified of what my reactions may be. Kris and Peter don't know me at all, so this is going to be
one thing that's interesting. So, Zack, you are not from Hampton Roads, and you've lived. I am not from Hampton Roads, so I have lived here now 23 years. Zack, how long have you been in the area?
Trying to do the math. 17, 18, about to be.
And
what about you guys? You guys from here?
Well, I actually moved to Virginia Beach in 2001. I'm originally from Northern California.
Okay.
And came to Virginia Beach. Then company I was with got acquired, and I moved to Pennsylvania for about 14, and then came back to Virginia Beach back in 2021. So second stint. Yeah.
Where in Pennsylvania?
Lancaster area, Amish country.
Okay. A little Dutch wonderland.
Absolutely. Great place for the kids.
Yeah. That's an amusement park.
It is.
For all of you wondering. It's not just a random
Zack,
statement.
you're pretty quick on that, man.
Yeah.
How about you, Peter?
I'm originally from Annapolis. Grew up there, went to school there, did the Navy thing for a few years. So I spent some time down in Hampton Roads when I was in the Navy in the kind of early 2000s period. And then have been back up north in Annapolis for the past 15 years or so until moving back to Richmond. I'm in Richmond now for the last 2 years or so.
It was interesting. I was in a meeting talking about this study, and we went around and we did introductions. and with all the different organizations that were part of this meeting, and there was not one person that was born and raised in Hampton Roads. Every single one of us were either a boomeranger that were born here, left, and then came back, or like us that moved here, loved the area, and then we decided to stay.
And it's pretty interesting too. One of the things we found in the study is the boomerangs, as we called them, the folks that grew up here, moved away either very often for the first job out of school, moved to a big metro, wound up coming back. And they're some of the biggest promoters of the region, biggest fans of the region. When you talk about things like NPS score, the boomerangs are kind of off the charts favorable on Hampton Roads. It's also really interesting, we'll get into more of the report, but one of the biggest reasons people, young professionals say they're thinking about leaving is the cost of living in Hampton Roads. Funnily enough, one of the biggest reasons people come back is the cost of living elsewhere. So we have a kind of section in the report talking about whether or not, maybe the grass isn't greener, right?
Interesting. So Nancy and Sean, they contacted you to do this study. You agreed to do this study. What went into capturing the data? What was the thought process there? What was the methods that you used to create the report?
Yeah, sure. So there was already really good data about what is happening and who is leaving, and the demographic research out of places like the Weldon Cooper Center at UVA, the Dreges Center over at ODU. They've done great work kind of showing what's happening. What we wanted to look at is why. So we did a survey, an online survey of 511 folks living in the region. We screened that population to try and get a third directly connected to the military, so either in the military or have family in the military or in the reserves. A third kind of indirectly connected to that military environment, so DoD civilians, contractors, folks who are working sort of quote unquote in the private sector but have a connection to the military, and then a third who have no connection to the military at all. And so we did an online survey. As I said, we asked about a whole variety of different quality of life issues in that survey, and we'll talk about the results of that. The second part of it was to understand kind of the entrepreneurial ecosystem. So Tim, you remember the conversation you and I had during that part of it. We did around 40 interviews with folks involved in the startup ecosystem, the various incubators, economic developers, founders, investors, to try to get a sense of some of the dynamics affecting the startup environment in particular. So that was kind of the methodology we used. Well,
what do you think, Zach? Do we dig in?
Is there a high level like takeaway? Like if you were a journalist, is there a headline? Is there a headline in there?
There's a couple, right? I think the biggest one is probably that there is not one magic lever that we can pull to fix the issue. Anecdotally, you talk to people, you guys probably hear this a lot, right? Why are young people leaving Hampton Roads? You tend to hear things like, well, we don't have a pro sports team, or the nightlife isn't really all that cool or hip. People kind of think that intuitively. The reality that we found in the study is it's much, much more bread and butter issues. The top 4 or 5 issues all had to do with cost of living, cost of housing, public safety and perceptions around public safety and crime. Career opportunities, another big one. So lots of folks thinking about leaving the area for economic opportunity. And then interestingly, kind of rounding out that top list was availability of healthcare, which we found pretty interesting given that the region, compared to other parts of the country, has actually pretty low percentage of uninsured folks. So we thought that was pretty interesting too. We can talk about, some hypotheses as to why that might have made the list. There's a couple of, there's kind of, go ahead, Zach.
With any report, with any kind of data point, my first thought on anything is what's the context of it, right? How are you pairing this towards other places, right? So if someone's saying, oh, this person is batting, 150 this year in MLB, I'm like, well, what did they bat last year? Because if they batted 160, it's basically the same year, right? So did you guys do anything from a comparative analysis of other cities and how that looks?
We didn't Yeah, it's a good question, Zach. We did not, as part of our project scope, look at kind of a comparative analysis of Hampton Roads versus other regions. That's kind of one of the clear next questions. And there are lots of folks looking at that. I do know that, in conversations with the folks at VEDP, the Virginia Economic Development Partnership, they've been doing work like this on a statewide basis and finding very similar things. So there's a lot that's not really unique to Hampton Roads. But I would say that, the military angle obviously is one of the more unique factors. If folks with a connection to the military or with a family member in the military, much more likely to be involved in the community in Hampton Roads, and much more likely to say they're going to be here in 5 years. So that was probably the biggest thing that might discriminate the Hampton Roads region from at least other parts of the state.
So as you guys are compiling this, Kris, I'm sure that you were involved in the report, or certainly had to go through the report and read it before that it was pushed back out to the clients. Was there any surprises for you, or what was your initial reaction when you were looking at the data?
Yeah, I think there was a lot of similar themes, and Peter kind of hit on that with other studies that were done in the past, and maybe they weren't tailored exactly to this particular audience. But I remember reading a report back in 2017 that Evans McMillan and Monique Adams did, and they were kind of looking at, the entrepreneurial ecosystem. And there were some similarities there around, one, this kind of sense of identity that in Hampton Roads, we have all these different cities, right? And then you include the peninsula, but we really don't have a kind of a common identity that we kind of rally around that makes, this area kind of unique, or this is what we're kind of known for. So certainly some of those themes emerged. I think the challenge sometimes with talent, particularly in the areas of tech talent or wage suppression. And it's kind of a two-edged sword, because, we attract people to Hampton Roads and businesses because of lower wages, but at the same time, people leave Hampton Roads because of they can make more money elsewhere. And so I think Peter's point about, and Zack around, what's the comparison point? And I think with some of these boomerangers, they realize when you leave somewhere else, you might make more money, but what is the cost of living point compared to what it's like in Virginia Beach?
Cost of living, traffic, a lot of other,
commute time,
Well, because it's interesting. Like I'm gonna use wrong words here, but the military housing stipend, right, where they get extra money. I feel like that already inflates that number a little bit more, right? At least 15. I think it's 1,500 is what their minimum was, something like that. So that already, like, you look at some of these apartments and you're hearing what people are paying, and you're like, okay, well, that's ridiculous. But it's because these landlords can charge that. And look, I'm all about them charging it. If they can get the money that you can, people are willing to pay it. But I mean, it inflates that number up, and you just see some of these prices, and it is high. But is it higher than some of these other big cities? Go to Northern Virginia. You can't get a place for less than $50,000 a month.
Yeah, one of the things
obviously a lot, but
one of the things we've talked a lot about since we finished the study, Zack, was, I think, and we didn't specifically look at this in our work, but one of the key things that folks who've been thinking about this for a long time will point to is the real sort of metric, if you like, that determines the pain that people feel from a cost of living standpoint is kind of the ratio between wages and cost of living in any area, right? So I think that's something that's really interesting or would be really interesting to look at, to your point about kind of a comparison with other regions.
The amount that they're paying plus what they're bringing in, that percentage is lower or higher, however we would look at it, in this region than other regions, is what you're saying, is what it seems like.
Yeah, and I don't want to misrepresent the data. There's some great work out of the Dreges Center at ODU where they've kind of looked at some of these ratios, and I think what I think is the case in Hampton Roads is that, yes, the cost of living is lower relative to some of these other metros or other regions, but the average wages are considerably lower too. So that difference between kind of discretionary income is something we ought to look at in the region.
Just like you said with the lever, these are things that like an individual cannot fix, right? You have to have an employer that's willing to pay more money, and you have to have the seller of a house or the landlord be willing to make less money on that? And
Yep.
I find that hard to grasp, that someone would be like, you know what, I'm just going to pay this person more money because I can. I'm going to take less money on this house because I can.
Yeah.
Right. I find that you said lever, like, I find that really hard to like think of how someone's going to want to fix that, because I don't want to have to pay more than I have to. And I definitely don't want to sell something for less than I could. I don't know if you guys would, but I feel like if you were to ask that generally to someone, be like, hey, will you buy this $5 cheeseburger? Oh, you know what? I'm going to do it for $3 today just because I'm being a nice person. If you know that you can get the 5, I don't know. I just find that people
I think that like you look at it in the sense of like from a minimum wage standpoint, you can have the government tell you that you need to have a minimum wage of X, or you can be an Amazon or a Starbucks that says, yeah, we're going to pay $2 above minimum wage, and we're going to give you this and this, and then they're the leader, and then they get top talent, they get the marketing aspect of everything that comes to it, and they get the enjoyment of having that top talent. So, they're perhaps, we're just waiting for a leader to come in and say, hey, come join our team. Because at the same time, everyone is saying that they're starved for talent as well. So it's just, it seems like we're stuck in a really interesting predicament in terms of what's going to give first.
Yeah.
Stuck
Zack,
for talent, but not paying.
Yeah, Zack, I think you made an interesting point when you're talking about the stipend, because I remember when I first moved to Virginia Beach in 2001, first of all, I was coming from Northern California. I was super excited to see the gas prices, which were $3.39 in California in 2001 to 99 cents in Virginia Beach, right? And we bought our first condo for like $60,000 in Virginia Beach, which you just couldn't touch anything in California for that. Obviously the prices have come up, but one of the things that I noticed, with a company I started working with in Norfolk at the time, was they were kind of benefiting from the fact that you had a lot of retired military who had maybe some type of retirement. And so they had some type of supplemental income. And so those businesses weren't paying, the market rate for that position because those people had some type of supplement. Or you had the military spouse who, their spouse is in the military. And so they're just looking for something to, keep them busy or whatever. And so it tend to suppress the wages. So I remember when our company was acquired by the company in Pennsylvania, I mean, our rates were much lower than what you would traditionally see in those particular roles because of some of those factors.
Yeah, I forgot all about that stuff. Yeah, that does come into play, and I wish that it didn't. Like for me, for someone that retired and is getting a retirement, it's like that has no bearing on what my worth is today.
Exactly. Yeah.
The other thing that's interesting here too, when you talk to the folks in economic development and across the various jurisdictions in Hampton Roads, there's a little bit of a catch-22 here too, right? Because those economic developers whose job is to recruit existing businesses to their locality, their jurisdiction, their region, one of the first selling points that they're going to go to is the fact that wages are lower in this region, right, relative to some of the others that would be competing to bring that business. So I'm no economist. There are folks a lot smarter than me, I know, working on this, but there is definitely a little bit of a catch-22 there.
Yeah, I know for us, I worked for a tech company for a while, and trying to attract tech talent, one, to relocate to Virginia Beach was challenging because some of them were like, hey, if this thing doesn't work out, there's really not the ecosystem for me to go to another tech company. Like if I was
across the street issue.
Yeah,
so
exactly.
Your competitor isn't there. Yeah.
Yeah. So you had to kind of deal with the remote factor, but even then you still had to pay, competitive market rates. So, our salaries might be more than what you would traditionally see in the Hampton Roads area just to be able to bring that kind of talent in.
So you said the word remote. So obviously we live in a world that changed a lot in the last, 48, 60 months because of this little thing called the COCO, AKA the coronavirus, AKA COVID-19. Haven't said that in like 5 years, Tim, But so does remote change any of this? Because people can be anywhere and a lot of companies are just like, screw it, work from home. We don't care. Like, how does that fit into this?
Yeah. Well, I think it's a good question. I used to say, when you're looking at talent, you have a few different options. One is, the speed in which you need the person, the quality of the talent, or the location, right? But you can only pick two, right? So if you want them in Virginia Beach, and you want them fast, then the quality of the talent you may lack, right? But if you need speed and you need quality, then you really got to be able to compromise on location, right? And so I think there's kind of a balancing act there. So some of it, I think it's a little bit of both. It's one, getting people to realize what positions you absolutely have to have in the office because of the collaborative factor, and what are those that could truly be done remote, and is there some way to kind of balance that? But at the same time, I think as organizations, if we're truly going to be attracting people to our companies, we got to look at what is fair market rate, for that type of role. And if we're going to attract that kind of talent, we're going to have to be at fair market rate for those roles.
Well, we've hinted around a little some things. Let's dive into the overall report, and Peter, just lead us into what were the findings. What do we need to hear, and let's dig in.
Okay. So as I said, the purpose here was to kind of find out why people are leaving. And as we said, it really boiled down. We asked everybody about 35 quality of life aspects of quality life. And we asked them, how important is this to your decision to stay or go? And then how satisfied are you with this aspect of your quality of life in Hampton Roads? And that's kind of where we got to those top 5 of cost of living, cost of housing, public safety and crime, economic opportunity, and availability of healthcare. So those really are the biggest levers that folks in these key demographics who are saying. We asked specifically the folks who said they may or may not be here in 5 years. What's driving those decisions, and those were the top 5. I think on the entrepreneurial ecosystem side, and Tim, I know you're going to have lots of thoughts about this. So you were one of the folks I talked to as part of this work. There were really kind of, first of all, everybody agrees that the entrepreneurial startup environment in Hampton Roads is much, much improved, particularly over the last decade or so. And I think that's largely a result of the work that you and others in the ecosystem have put into developing resources for startups and founders. There are a tremendous actually now set of resources if you're thinking about starting a business in Hampton Roads. Where it gets a little bit more tricky is, okay, now we've established product market fit. We want to try and go and scale. We need to start thinking about kind of Series A, Series B capital. That gets a lot trickier in Hampton Roads, and that's where you start to see startups that have made good headway, had good traction in the market. Some of them leave because they need to go elsewhere to find that next phase of capital to build their growth. So that's a big one. I think the other one that you hear is the notion of this fragmented political geography, right? No surprise to you guys, I'm sure, or anybody listening to this, but there's 17 jurisdictions that make up Hampton Roads. Most of them have their own economic development arms that are working on bringing, business to Portsmouth or to the beach or to Norfolk or to Hampton and so forth. Sometimes those can be in competition with each other. So I think there's a notion amongst folks in this startup ecosystem that it would be, I think, to everybody's benefit if we could take a little bit more regional approach to both growing, startups and growth stage companies locally, but also attracting business. We got to build the whole ecosystem in order to keep talent here. To get to Kris's point about, it's tough to bring tech talent in particular to the region, because what if it doesn't work out with this startup? I can't walk across the street to another opportunity. So the more kind of critical mass that we can build there, I think that's a big piece of it. The last thing I'll mention is kind of the probably a little controversial, but the regional brand or awareness of the region outside the region. So I wanted to ask all 3 of you guys, having lived in the region, when you're in, this is the question we asked on our survey, so I'm curious to hear how you guys would answer this. If you're in an airport outside the region and somebody asks where you're from, how do you describe where you're from? Maybe Kris, we'll start with you.
Yeah, I identify by the city I live in, so I'll say Virginia Beach.
And that's
Yeah.
an easy answer for Kris because like
Yeah.
everybody knows Virginia Beach. So for me, I live on the peninsula, and I always answer I am from the Norfolk, Virginia Beach area of Virginia.
Okay. How about you, Zach?
Well, who started that term, Tim? I feel like I started that term 15 years ago. Who call the region Norfolk, Virginia Beach, right? Look at other cities. I don't want to go on this tangent, but like this is such an easy answer to me. If you just look at other cities across the country, it's not like there's not a lot of smaller cities that are attached to a bigger city. You know, it's like you don't call Pontiac, Michigan, Pontiac. You call it Detroit, right? So
Well,
here,
like, and
you don't have
when
to
you
worry.
look at it from a New York City standpoint, I mean, they have
What do they
cities
call
within
it? New York
counties,
City.
within boroughs. But they're like several layers deeper than what we are.
What do people know it as? But what do people know it
Well,
as?
that's what I'm saying.
New York
That's my
City.
point. Right.
Yeah. Like
Yeah.
to me, I have lived here 17 years. This is the most ridiculous conversation that we are still having because it is such an easy fix. But people don't want to look at the outside world and be like, it's just like what you said, right? Like if you're out somewhere, what are you going to say? You're going to say Norfolk or Virginia Beach if you want someone to know where you are, right? I remember I've told this story here before, but I like to tell it because I think it's hilarious. I was with Brian Stevens of the Hampton Roads Chamber of Commerce. We were in Knoxville, Tennessee. We're going around introducing ourselves to some people, and he goes to this person, "Hey, I'm from Hampton Roads." The guy looks at him dumbfounded. Then I'm next, and I go, "Oh, I'm from Norfolk." And the guy goes, "Oh, my brother was in the Navy there." To the same person who was dumbfounded, doesn't know Hampton Roads, but knows Norfolk. It's Norfolk International Airport, Virginia Beach. Like, I don't know. Maybe I'm just a decent marketing guy who understands the branding behind this, but like, it's such an easy answer that we want to like come up with all these other solutions where it's like the answer's there. Go watch the Today Show. The Today Show is going to say Norfolk right there, right? It doesn't say Hampton Roads. It doesn't say Tidewater. It doesn't say Poquoson. It says places that people know on a map. I don't know why this is such a hard decision, but I'm done. I'm not saying anything else the rest of the show.
Well, I think the newest one was the 757, right? They were trying to get some momentum behind that, and that seems to be dying.
So, Zach, how do you think people answered this? Remember, we asked 511 people from Hampton Roads. They're
What
in
are
an
they?
airport.
Are they? Is it a single question?
The question was, you're in an airport somewhere outside the region. Somebody asked where you live. How do you describe it? Your answers are Hampton Roads. I say I'm from my specific city, town, or county. Coastal Virginia, Virginia coast. 757, the 757, anything with 757 in it. Eastern, southeastern Virginia, or the Tidewater. Those were the options on the survey.
Yeah, my guess is it's 18% across the board. Everyone had a different answer.
It's actually not. So in the survey, 43% of people said Hampton Roads. Now I'm going to preface that with, we just asked them a whole bunch of questions about Hampton Roads. So there's probably some bias to that answer. The next most popular answer was, I say my specific town or country or city. So I say Virginia Beach, I say Norfolk, I say Portsmouth, whatever.
What percentage is that?
That was 23%.
Okay.
23% of people. Yeah. So I mean, that's the bulk of people. That's 2/3 of people right there. The next one, surprisingly, was coastal Virginia or Virginia coast. That was.
But
14%.
Virginia is an entire coast. So coastal Virginia is such a weird thing because it goes all the way up to.
It goes all the way up to Maryland. Yeah. So down at the bottom, you had 757, 8%, tied with Eastern or Southeastern Virginia, both at 8%, and then 2% said Tidewater. So no consistent. To your point, Zach, it's not like everybody calls it the same thing. And I do think a lot of people answered Hampton Roads because they just took a survey all about Hampton Roads.
Well, it's interesting. I think that I can only think of Tampa Bay is like the only other region that tries to label themselves as something that they're not. So like Hampton Roads, there is no city of Hampton Roads. Tampa Bay, there is no city of Tampa Bay. But they have the one thing that we don't have, and that is professional sports franchises that can help drive that messaging. But even then, they've kind of dropped off the Bay more so now than in the past.
Yeah. So that's one thing on the identity piece. Another kind of interesting thing that, at least interesting to me, that came out of the survey, we asked about public safety, and we asked a couple different ways. So we asked, do you feel safe where you live? That was the first question we asked. And the vast majority, 84%, I think 86% of folks said, yes, I feel safe or very safe or extremely safe where I live. Okay. We asked it slightly differently later in the survey, where we asked, regardless of where you live in the region, rank the public safety of these localities. Okay. And when you ask the question that way, you get much more of a perception-based kind of look at things. And it's different, right? It's not 80% of people feel they're safe where they live. It's
so different cities are more vicious than others. Unsafe.
Exactly. So the way we asked it was, sort of how would you rate the public safety in Norfolk? Extremely safe, somewhat safe, on a Likert scale, 5-point scale. How would you rate Hampton Roads overall, City of Hampton, Chesapeake, Virginia Beach, Suffolk, Norfolk, and Newport News? Okay. Any guesses on how that came out? Again, this is a population from across the region that we're asking.
I mean, my guess is the perception would be Portsmouth and Norfolk and Newport News are unsafe places. Probably then Hampton, Chesapeake and Suffolk would be safe, and I think Virginia Beach would maybe be somewhere in the middle.
Yeah. So I'll tell you. So we did this based on the top two answers. So for the percentage of the folks we asked, they either said it's extremely safe or very safe. That was 53% for the beach, 57% for Chesapeake, 53 for Suffolk, 53 for Portsmouth, 65 for Hampton, 48 for Norfolk, and 46 for Newport News. So it's a very different when you ask about perceptions. And Tim, we were talking, I think, right before we went live about some of the narratives you hear in the media, and if it bleeds, it leads kind of thing. There is a perception of things that may or may not be accurate, right? I don't live in those areas. I don't have a first-hand opinion. But when you ask people, do you feel safe where they live? Vast majority of them feel safe where they live, regardless of where they are in the region. So that was another kind of interesting point, I thought.
Yeah, I can't think of a time that I've ever felt unsafe. There might be things. There is a dark corner over there, MacArthur Center Mall, near across from the park there, that can get a little. It's just dark and there's just nothing there. That would be the only place. But I mean, I remember telling people that I was going to something in the water, and people thought that we were crazy. Like, oh my gosh, are you going to go to something like that? And I think it's the perception.
Right. It's like, oh my God, they're going to bring in all these hoodlums. They're going to do these things. And it's like, well, let's look at the other way. Like, hey, by the way, this local guy is bringing in all these people to perform this great thing. Let's look at that on the positive aspect. Yeah. I remember a media publication at some point 10 years ago spun the story of Smithfield and like a Mara group being purchased by someone else is a bad thing. I'm like, tell any entrepreneur that's starting a business here that in 15 years you're going to sell your business for billions of dollars, and that's a bad story. Like, we need to be thinking of the positive aspects of that. Like, yeah,
I know for me, I felt like it was a civic duty that I had to tell as many people that I could that something in the water, mighty dream. There was so much love and happiness and friendliness in the air that it was just like that was like my element, and in the sense of it was a wonderful experience, But when you let others change that perception, it's just amazing the impact that it had on so many people.
I think it also
is there a better story than what Pharrell's done? I mean, think about that, right? You're looking for someone who's done such amazing things on a global scale, and is now bringing that back to the community, and people are going to crap on that. Like, I don't know. Like, I can't say anything negative about that guy, except for maybe the clothes he wears. But that's.
That's just because we can't afford the clothes that he wears, right?
I don't know that I like that style on me. Maybe if he comes out with a black tee, I'll be fine with it.
Yeah, even still though, Louis Vuitton black tee, probably $500, I'm guessing.
The shade of black.
So what do we do with the information? Or Peter, go ahead. What else did you have to add on?
No, I was just going to say that it kind of goes to this, I think, goes to this notion of boomerangs too. You know, we talked a little bit earlier about this cohort of folks within our survey who grew up in the region, or, you know, maybe went to school in the region, moved away, and then have come back, often around the time they're thinking about starting families. When you ask questions like net promoter score on the region, the boomerangs are off the chart. So let me just talk about NPS really quickly, because it goes to kind of some of the key characteristics of the population that is really thinking about leaving versus that's which, you know, really rooted here. So the highest highest cohort of folks that we surveyed, and from an NPS score, net promoter score standpoint, are those folks who have lived here longer than 10 years. Kind of no surprise, they like it here, they feel good about it, they chose to stay. Boomerangs are right underneath there. It's the top one was 31, boomerangs were 29. Household incomes above 75K had very, very high net promoter scores for the region, and folks with children in the home. So if you got children in the home, your net promoter score was 25. On the other end of that spectrum, household incomes under 75K were 3, net promoter score of 3. No children in the home, 0. Private sector employees, 0. So this is that third I talked about that has no connection to the military whatsoever, 0 NPS score. And those who have lived here less than 5 years, also at 0. So those are kind of the two ends of the spectrum. And when we looked at who's leaving, it's younger folks, 20s and 30s primarily, who are not connected to the military in any way, who remote work. Interestingly, remote work, to your point earlier, Tim, remote workers were more likely than folks who worked on site to say they were going to leave the region. So those are kind of the key takeaways, I think. So those, if you look for sort of the ends of the spectrum where there might be levers to pull, those are kind of it, I think.
Just quick things. Did school systems or the ranking of the school systems here, did that come up? Was this anywhere? And then that first, anything like that?
We did ask about the quality of K-12 schools. It was not up in our kind of top quadrant of the most important factors that people were least satisfied with, but it is certainly on the list. It's kind of just below the threshold. That and childcare accessibility are kind of right below our line.
Yeah, it's real expensive now, I hear.
Yeah.
Do we know where these people who are leaving are going?
We did ask a question about that, and I'll have to pull up the exact data, but the majority of folks who said that they're leaving Hampton Roads are not going to Nova, they're not going to Richmond, they're not even going to the Mid-Atlantic. They're going somewhere else in the U.S. So, you know, we didn't ask specific. Yeah, well, that was the highest answer was I'm going somewhere outside even the Mid-Atlantic. You know, so we asked, are you leaving the city? Are you leaving the region? Are you leaving the state? Are you leaving the country? The biggest answer was I'm leaving the Mid-Atlantic region.
And was there any reason as to why did that go deeper as to what is the primary driver as to why they're leaving?
Well, I mean, the 5 things I talked about earlier are kind of the main reason people are leaving. We did not get into why are you going further afield, if that's what you meant.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts
I think. What's that, Zack?
What are your thoughts on this? Like when you're hearing this, what are you thinking?
Well, I don't know. I think that there, for a large part, we're so close to the trees that we don't see the forest, in the sense of, like, we have great schools. I mean, that's one of the things that tied us here. I think that it's really, really funny from a higher ed standpoint, we have great schools from that standpoint as well. Like when you look at if I go to CNU or if I go to William & Mary and ODU, I mean, like, so many people from outside of the region come to those schools. A lot of Northern Virginia residents come down here. A lot of out of state, out of country, international students are here. So I think that we need to be reminded of those things that we have. We've talked about it a lot, Zack, that the craft brewery stuff, that's more of a micro level thing, but like that's a really, really great scene that could be further branded. I don't, for whatever reason, there's just
the concept that I think we're getting at, Kris and Peter, is that if you look at Napa and how they became like this wine thing, we could do that with craft breweries from Williamsburg to even the Outer Banks, as they have a couple as well. That's how I treat the region, by the way, is Outer Banks to Williamsburg, something like that. A little bit of the Eastern Shore. Don't forget about them. They got that little thing that just hangs over. But yeah, I mean, it's interesting that this stuff is here. I feel like I'm not surprised by anything. You know,
Yeah.
I was hoping for something crazy.
And I think that you hit on that something really important, Zach. It's just like, the whole definition of insanity. It's just we continue to do the same thing over and over again and expect a different result. And it's just like, how many times have I been to a meeting where we've got to attract the younger people? We have to retain the younger people, and then I look around the table, and it's all the same old people, so to speak, that are talking about this. That we have. It's like, what new blood, what new ideas, what new energy are we bringing to the table to generate some new ideas, and then therefore having a different result.
And honestly, I feel like when you bring in some of that old energy, as a person who's lived this myself, you kind of feel blackballed, where they don't really want to listen to what you want to say. It's their way or the highway. And they're just like, I don't like, I'm a very abrasive, blunt person who will come in there and be like, yo, like y'all are doing this very wrong. And it's like, no, like you're wrong, Mr. Miller. And it's interesting how we want to include this other generation or these other individuals. And then maybe when we bring them there, we don't really care what they have to say. And so it's really interesting. Like we talk about the 17 cities, the name of the region. Let's just talk about the 17 cities aspect of this. Like I think everyone would agree, for the majority, that it would make sense to do things together. But why don't we do that? Right? Is it because the people in power don't want to lose that power aspect of it? Like it's just, don't ask the question if you don't want the answer, is what I'm saying. And when you get that answer, it's like, well, the results are saying this. If you want to fix it, this is what you have to do. Don't ask the question if you don't want that solution, you don't want to work on it. And I feel like that is this region in a nutshell, is oftentimes they get this answer and they're like, well, not today, Sonny. Not today.
Younger people are now being invited to the boards or at least to meetings, which is great. I think that that's a really, really positive step. The Hampton Roads Planning District Commission, they've invited some younger people to the table, which is great. And that even lends itself, Zach, we've talked about this show before, that one of the things that's so nice about Northern Virginia is the fact that they have running trails and bike trails all over the place, so that everything is much more accessible. I would love to run or bike to work, but it's just, I can't do it based on the fact of it's just too dangerous. And it's a four lane highway in order to get, to do something like that. So,
yeah. So, listening to you guys,
it's a newer area up there too. So they've built all that stuff in where there's not a lot of new home construction. Someone's going to, in the comments, be like, there's tons of new homes going, but like, a lot of that stuff is newer developments where you're able to do all that stuff, from Dulles Airport to DC. Kris?
Yeah, I think you guys are all over. I mean, it's kind of been interesting, having lived once in Virginia Beach, leaving and then coming back to the region, and seeing how much the region has progressed. I mean, to some of your points, I mean, we've got great beaches. We've got great fishing, boating, waterways. You can live in the city. You can live in the country. We're now getting great restaurants. We're getting breweries. So we got all of those, pieces that are coming together. I think the biggest challenge is how do we attract more industry here, right? Where people, they can, find, great jobs, build great careers, and really kind of build their family here. So one example of one I saw not too long ago, I was in Bentonville, Arkansas. I don't know if you guys have ever been to Bentonville, but Bentonville back in the day was kind of really nothing there. And of course, Walmart is headquartered there. But it's kind of interesting, like the ecosystem that Walmart built around Bentonville, because their suppliers are there. And so they want people to basically live, eat, play, build their career here. And so just the whole ecosystem there. I mean, they're like one of the mountain biking capitals of the world, and they don't even have any mountain bike hills to climb. It's kind of bizarre how they've become that, right? But there's this sense of kind of identity of the Walmart, really kind of investing back into the community of how do we get people to stay here. And so I think we need to be looking at one, I think we've done a great job of really accelerating some of these startups and the startup community that's there. How do we attract more industry where we're really focused on, creating that ecosystem where people, when they come here, they don't have to leave for other jobs or higher paying jobs somewhere else, because it has all of these other pieces that are what make, the Hampton Roads area so great.
Yeah. I mean, so that said, in terms of, is it a tax rate thing? Is it, we just have to get more industry just to give back, so to speak? Do you have any thoughts regarding that?
I think some of it ties back to that identity piece, right? Of the fact that, how could we work together as a region and what's best for the region, regardless of where that particular entity puts its headquarters, whether it's in Chesapeake or in Newport News or whatever, it benefits the region, So I think we have to think more as a region to bring that in.
Okay, so I agree. But why doesn't that just happen? Like, it's such an easy thing to fix, I feel like. Let's work as a region, because that makes more sense. The whole boat, rising tide.
Well, I think the thing that, gosh, at the risk of ruffling some feathers here, I think that what happens is that we have all these meetings where we're inviting the individual localities to the table. And then when everyone's around the table, it's very easy for everyone to nod their head and say, yes, we're on board. And then as soon as the meeting is over, then we have to go back to the same behavior that we had, because at the end of the day, we have to report back to the constituents, to our bosses, or to whatever the mission statement is. Whereas in order to make this change, we have to bring in the true regional players together to make a change for the region. That's just my take.
I think there's potentially a prototype too that could be followed with what's happened with the Hampton Roads transit piece. So that you guys probably know more about it than I do even, but from what I've learned, there is a separate independent organization that is a regional entity empowered to levy taxes on residents of the region to solve transportation problems in the region. It's a big reason, to my understanding, that the bridge tunnels work is happening. Right. And I've had the opportunity to listen to some of their presentations. So my point in saying that is that it has been done. There are regional things that have worked in real tangible ways that could be explored as a potential kind of example.
With the report, did you all provide any suggested action items, or is that you left that for the Workforce Council and for the Executive Roundtable to decide?
Yeah, so I mean, there were a couple of things. One of which, were sort of really evident based on our work. That is, if you can find ways to attract more boomerangers back to the region, I think that would be a very positive thing. That accomplishes a couple of things in one fell swoop. You're bringing talent back to the region. B, you're bringing they tend to be huge promoters of the region that are going to help you spread the message outside the region about how great things are and all the assets we have here and why it's great to live here. And they tend to be, very passionate about helping build the community and the economic environment and those sorts of things. So a significant portion of the folks that I spoke to or worked with in some way during this effort were boomerangers and feel very invested. I think, all three of you in your own ways are boomerangers and feel very passionate about bringing some of the things we've seen elsewhere that we know could happen in Hampton Roads, but just haven't yet. So that's kind of the one recommendation I would make. But the Hampton Roads Executive Roundtable and the Hampton Roads Workforce Council are in the process of putting together a working group to kind of think about what's next. And my understanding is they've already had a couple of meetings to that and are getting folks, and I think trying to include, to your point earlier, Tim and Zack, about including younger voices in that too. So I would look for more to come from them. They're kind of taking this ball and running it down the field at this point. And Tim, I think you're even involved in that, are you not?
I have been to the first 2 meetings, and there is. I'm encouraged. I'm highly encouraged, and I've just always been of the mindset that until the pain is strong enough, change is not going to happen. So, and I think now the right organizations and players are around the table, and the pain is starting to be significant enough, so to speak, that we've got to do something now where there's some level of proactivity versus being reactive. If we wait until we're reactive, then it's just way too late at that point. And then, my worst fear is that, we're the next generation of a Rust Belt community. We can't wait that long.
Well, Nancy and Sean, Nancy Grden at the Executive Roundtable and Sean Avery at the Workforce Council, both tremendous dynamic leaders. I feel very encouraged that they're involved, and hopefully our work has at least provided some data to what I think primarily, in the past has been a little bit of a anecdotal conversation. What do we need to fix? Hopefully this provides some hard data about where the pain points actually are. That'll give somewhat of a roadmap for that.
Well, what is Fahrenheit?
Yeah, happy to share it with you guys. So we provide interim, fractional, and project-based consulting for middle market companies. So middle market's pretty broad, but think of $10 million to $250 million companies. We certainly do work with smaller companies as well too. Our sweet spot's really in kind of the office of the CFO, finance and accounting, office of the CHRO, so everything HR and executive search. And then we also do some business advisory work, which is very similar to what Peter's doing, where we look at strategy transformation, business transformation type work. So we started back in 2010 up in Richmond, and we're now in Hampton Roads as well too. And we have about 140 consultants that work on our team with businesses across the community.
And how would you define the word Fahrenheit, or how did you guys come up with that? Why is that the name of the business?
Because it was the hardest word to spell.
I like that.
Yeah, it's but part of it was the one of the original investors had the name with some of our other companies, and so it ended up getting that name. But we kind of like it, right? We're either we're raising the temperature or we're lowering the temperature in an organization, and both could be good, right? You like that, Zack? I see that.
I like that. I like the aspect of screwing with the people that you're trying to work with to make them think about how to spell it. I love that little Easter egg in there. Hey, by the way, we know you guys can't spell, so boom, Fahrenheit it is.
Yeah, we'll get your email if you can spell our name. So.
I would did that prompt you? Did you buy different variations of spelling from the domain name standpoint to auto direct it?
That's a good question. I am not sure. Right. I am not sure, but
I fall in the same category. Of trying to be too cute with my business, and I laugh with you.
Yeah. Well, one of our founders had a great idea of saying, "Hey, what if we had Fahrenheit University?" And then we started thinking through the initials on that, and thought maybe that's a great idea or a bad idea.
I find that to be a great idea.
I think so too.
Yeah, over here at FU,
Yeah.
FA, FU, I don't know. Whatever. Okay, so Tim and I like to ask this question. If you were bringing someone into town for the weekend and you want to take them to a restaurant, what restaurant would you take them to? And or what is the region's food
or beverage?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a good question. So you want the specific restaurant we would take them to?
Absolutely.
All right, so there's probably two, and these are usually on the top of my wife's list. One is Heirloom, which is over near the courthouse in Virginia Beach. They have amazing food.
Mm-hmm.
The other is the Porch over there on the Lynn Haven Inlet, because it's the great view, great food. Those would probably be the two.
Hard to get into the Porch.
It is. Yeah, you got to really plan in advance for sure.
Mm-hmm. Pete?
I like the Porch too, and Heirloom is great. There's a couple really nice places now, having not lived there for almost 20 years at this point, but going back and forth. There's a whole variety of really cool restaurants that were not there when I lived there, kind of down by the water in Norfolk, and then on the other side in Portsmouth. So some of those have been really kind of fun to visit. I'm also an old Navy guy, so I like getting to be near the water and seeing, kind of back to my roots.
Yeah,
I love how you answered a question. I love how you answered a question without actually saying any restaurant or style of food. I like to be by the water.
I'm taking the porch and I'm going with seafood.
Okay. Yeah, so the premise of that question all started really, and it comes down to the brand identity that we were talking so much about. Was what you got? Deep dish pizza, buffalo chicken wings, crab cakes. A lot of these locations have like a staple food item. So Zach and I, we've talked hours trying to figure out what is the thing that we can say that Hampton Roads represents, and the closest answer that we've received was, from a beverage standpoint, a lot of people resort to the Orange Crush, which is, I agree.
Dangerous.
There's a big controversy between my home state of Maryland and Delaware over the Orange Crush. It's actually pretty interesting. Delaware is trying to make the Orange Crush its state drink.
Oh, really?
Maryland is very upset because it was created in Ocean City, Maryland. Apparently.
I think that I always thought that it was something that started in Virginia Beach with Waterman's.
Yeah. Supposedly it started in Ocean City.
But, Virginia needs to clean it really quick.
Allegedly.
Hey, we did start the ice cream cone, the waffle cone. Allegedly. Tim.
Yeah. But
what's the other thing, Tim?
And then I think from the food side, it has been all over the place. We are like a cornucopia of food, but things that are, I think the white sauce that you get from at the Mexican restaurants is a common.
Yeah. Or how about the when you go to like Surf Rider and you get the big broccoli with that hollandaise sauce? That's kind of a unique. You tell people about that and they're kind of like, really? You want to take me to go get a big piece of broccoli? And it's like, it's really good, actually.
Huh.
Yeah.
Peter, what do you think that answer is for Richmond? What's the food of Richmond?
The food's actually a little bit trickier because there's such a wide variety up here now. The first place I take people who have not been here before, being relatively new to the city myself, is some of the breweries, to be honest.
Yeah.
And there's some great food options at a lot of those, but the plethora of amazing restaurants in this city is really kind of spoiling. My wife and I just went to the Possum last couple weeks, and it's just amazing. One of the best places, top 5 places I've ever eaten at. So we're really spoiled up here.
I mean, the cool thing is that after doing this show for 220 something episodes, and we've been asking this question for
221.
Not all 221 episodes, but there is a lot of choices that people can choose from in this region. So that, I mean, it's from that standpoint, it's great. And
I went to a place last week, Tim, Dorican Chef, which is Puerto Rican food. And I had been to Puerto Rico about 18 months ago. It was damn good. So you might want to try that out. It's on Holland Road. Apparently, allegedly, they also have one at the oceanfront. I have not confirmed or denied that. So
is
there anything we haven't?
We just as a region, I think that we have to start believing in ourselves, and we need to start betting on ourselves. And I think that's the big piece. So I think that it's great when I see headlines that when the governor announces or VDP announces that this company is coming in or this international company is here, it's just like, if international companies are seeing this and if other places are coming and seeing the opportunity that we have here, what is the missing piece as to why we don't see that opportunity within ourselves or why we don't believe in ourselves? And again, I think that this time is going to lapse and all of a sudden there's not going to be any land left and it's going to be too expensive. And then we lost everything that we had. I don't know. I spent a lot of time thinking about it, but I really encourage everyone to start believing in themselves and believing in the region. And that will go a long way.
Absolutely.
Tim Ryan, 2028.
Got my vote.
I'm in.
Are you? Wait,
I can't do any worse, right? Than what's currently out there.
we're not taking this conversation. No, we're not doing this. We appreciate you guys. Is there anything that you want to talk about that we haven't talked about?
Not really. I think, the just kind of parting thought I would leave. I agree with you, Tim. There's a tremendous amount of potential in the region. It's just a question of who can figure out how to kind of tap it in a way, that cooperative way that needs to happen. I'm excited to watch. I think there's some real inertia behind it.
Yeah, I do feel like we're like, there's the lava. Well, I guess it's not molten rock underneath the crust right now that is just waiting to erupt. And then once that happens, I think that a lot of great things will be there. And it's my mission in life. We've got to create that first unicorn that IPOs, and then once we get that first IPO under our belt, to create some wealth amongst the community that we'll be able to believe in ourselves. And we'll be able to recreate that cycle to continue to reinvest within our community. So I know that we're going to be working super hard for that first IPO. And then,
have we never had one? I mean, we've had billion-dollar businesses.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, we have some publicly traded companies, but I don't know if there's been one on our radar that we have watched.
I know Dollar Tree was the big success story. I'm not sure of the history of.
Hell of a story.
Yeah.
I mean, because you can't really count like Ferguson because it's their parent company that went public. But it would just be really awesome for us to see a company go from startup to IPO. I mean, that would change the landscape of our region.
Yeah, for sure.
All right. Well, appreciate your time. This was rad. And,
happy birthday, Tim.
Well,
happy birthday, Tim.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
It was a lovely day. See you guys soon.